My name is Aaron.
Okay,
Aaron Mayo. Yeah, I think you have to click. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Name is Aaron Mayo. I'm originally from the U.S. and after I graduated college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to Korea and taught English there for 3 years. I lived in Daegu, and after that, I came back to the U.S., started a master's program, lived in China for a while, and then I started working at the University of Wisconsin in the University of Wisconsin system. So very experienced with U.S. admission procedures, as well as U.S. student services programs and international orientation intake programs for international students. So after that, I moved to Myanmar and worked as a college counselor there. So I've got about 5 years. This is my year 5 as a college and university counselor. And I'm very excited to be at ISV and helping students kind of navigate that often complex higher education landscape.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the diploma program. And one of the things that I think is important to understand about the diploma program is that just like the IGCSE programs that many of your students already went through, is it's a 2 years program of learning subjects. In the case of the IB, it's 6 subjects in 6 groups. And the groups that we have are divided between languages and literature, which is what we call our language A groups. And for many of your students, that will be English and Vietnamese and Korean. And then we have the language acquisition groups, which are called language B, which are a second language that they would be learning. Some of your students will be in English B, which means that their English is their second language, and that their language A, their Korean or their Vietnamese, would be their stronger language. And so we have them doing the English B there as well. But it is taught at the same time as the other English classes. We also have French B and Spanish B, Spanish ab initio in that group. And that allows our students to acquire a second language if they're interested in doing so. We also have our third group is individuals and societies, and that includes all of the humanities subjects, history, geography, ITGS, business and management. And those subjects are specifically in that group because they are more humanitarian approaches to learning and understanding things from a humanities aspect. The sciences is our 4th group, and our 4th group includes biology, chemistry, and physics, and also not computer sciences, because that's in the mathematics group. And then we have the 5th group, which is mathematics. We have 2 courses in the IB. One is approaches and analysis to mathematics, and the other is applications and interpretations. In difficulty, these courses are not different, and half of the curriculum is actually very similar. But when you get to the mathematics applications and interpretations, there's a lot more information about that looks at probabilities and graphing and those types of things. And so the course is a little bit different once we get to the 2nd year. The difference within the courses is the higher level and standard level, which I'll explain in a little bit as well. Our arts courses that we offer at ISV are music and visual arts. But sometimes if a student is not interested in those 2 subjects, they can, in this group, in this block of learning time, they can also take an additional individuals and societies course, science course, or mathematics course, depending upon the subject group where it's offered. And it's important to understand that allows our students to have a variability in the program. There is a second component to the IB, and that is what we call the core. The core courses are all required for completion of the IB diploma, and that is the Theory of Knowledge course. Some people like to say it's a philosophy course. I don't like that description because I think it doesn't go far enough. It's not just asking the students to talk about philosophy, but it's also asking them to challenge their own understandings of the world around them and looking at the world through a variety of perspectives. And so the Theory of Knowledge course really develops our students' intellectual thinking and allows them to become more open-minded and well-balanced thinkers in some ways. The extended essay is also a requirement. The students usually start working on the extended essay in grade 11 with the goal of completing it and submitting it by the first semester of grade 12. It is an extended research paper. So many of us as university graduates, we know that when we're in university, we have many papers that we have to complete in one semester for all of our classes. This is the first type of research paper that our students do. It must be a maximum of 4,000 words and about a minimum of 3,500. So it is a real research paper where they have to figure a completely an interesting research question. And once again, it's not a descriptive research paper, it's an analytical research paper where they have to use academic resources and do research that goes beyond just simple internet searches. And so it does take a long time for them to process how to do this, and they have supervisors who support them in that process. The third part of the core is creativity, activity, and service. And this is it's an additional component to the IB, to the DP learning that the students must do in their own free time outside of classes, although they have a class period time dedicated to meeting with the CAS coordinator to make sure they're following the requirements. But they must have a combination of activities that make them a more well-balanced learner. The goal of this is so that they're not just only focused on academic items, but that they should be developing interests in creative endeavors. Activity means a physical component. That can be going from being on a football team to doing yoga in a yoga studio or going to a gym and working out as well. The service component is a little bit more difficult in the sense that they also have to do a component where they're showing that they're participating in a service approach to their community, their school community, whatever it might be in terms of what they're interested in doing. But they have to make contact with other people and work to support something that gives back, not just being a member of something, but really participating and experiencing what it's like to maybe work with a group of students who need extra help, or work with an elderly community, whatever might be available to them and that they're interested in doing. And this is, everyone kind of always asks me, well, can't we just do this in one semester? No, this must be done consistently over the 2 years of the DP program. And so it's must be done during the time period, and the way that we know that it's being done is that students are required to complete reflections on it. In order for students to meet the requirements of the program, they must take 3 higher level courses and 3 standard level courses from the 6 subjects that I mentioned earlier. And they decide whether it's a higher level component or a standard level one. The difference between higher level courses is that there are 240 hours of instruction for higher level courses, and more subject options are taught. So for instance, when I taught psychology, for my higher level students, we had to cover 2 options. One was abnormal psychology and developmental psychology, but my standard level students only had 150 hours of instruction with me, and so they only were required to have 1 option. And so we would usually do the developmental psychology instead of doing both for them. Now, the reason for that is because we have to remember that DP courses are actually equivalent to a first-year entry-level university course at most universities in the world. So in 2 years, our students complete that level of understanding and learning processes in our courses. The higher level courses allow them to get a deeper understanding of it. So students will select courses at higher level for things that they think they might study at university in the future. And standard level courses will be at the level, it will be still at that introductory level, but not as in depth. And we are required to only offer 3 higher levels and 3 standard levels, because if we put all of the courses at higher level for our students, there is no way they would manage the needs of the program in order to be successful learners in the DP program. I have students right now trying to beg me to do 4 higher levels, and I say, no, you cannot do 4 higher levels because you will just not manage the amount of work that you have to do for 4 courses at higher level. So we keep to the 3 and 3, and we know that the students will be able to balance their learning in that way. I'm going to move on to the next one, but if you do have any questions as I go along, please put them in the chat and we can come back to them in a little bit as well. Okay. IB examinations are what the students do at the end of grade 12, and they only occur in May of grade 12. You will have your students have practice examinations during different times of the year within their classes, and we will have end of year exams, and we will have mock examinations to prepare for these IB examinations. But the ones that count the most and the ones that the universities will be looking for results from are those that occur in May of grade 12. They cover material from both grades 11 and 12, which is important to remember because that requires that your sons and daughters have a system for processing and organizing their work beginning from grade 11 all the way to grade 12. And they need to think that everything they're doing in grade 11 now counts towards that final goal of being successful in the grade 12 exams. Examination marks at the end of the 2 years include a combination of both what we call internal and external assessments. The internal assessments usually count between 20 to 30% of the grade of the final examination grade. It's a required assignment that the IB actually creates, and what happens is that the students can approach that assignment from a perspective of interest within the topic and in the course, and they develop the work within that course period. They're usually investigations. In sciences, they can be experiments. In English classes, there'll be written tasks or oral tasks. And for instance, in my psychology class, the students actually always had to create a psychological experiment that they would conduct in the school using ethical standards and so forth. But then they would have to write up the results of that experiment and focus on the criteria for the internal assessment to do that. Now, all of these internal assessments are guided by their teachers. So the goal is that because they're guided by the teacher and they have support in doing it, that their marks should be quite high in completing them. And the thing that where the only times that students find that their marks aren't high is if they're not really meeting the deadlines that the teachers are setting. So it's very important to be aware of when these internal assessments are being worked on in different classes and how the teachers are developing the internal assessment to support the students. I call an internal assessment banking a mark. And what that means is that if I go into the examinations with 20 to 30% of my grade at the highest grade, which is a 7 in the IB, I can assume that if I do poorly on one of my exams, my internal assessment mark is going to keep my mark at a reasonable level for the final exam grade. But we have to remember that as a result of that, the external assessments are 70 to 80% of the final grade in IB as well. And that means that the students will have 1 to 3 examination papers that they'll have to write over that exam period. So they'll have one day where they might have a paper 1 and a paper 2, and then they'll have another day where they have a paper 3. And then that essentially allows them to break up the exams during the examination period. But it also means that each examination has a different requirement that they have to be aware of. Once again, this occurs only in May of grade 12. And the examinations are usually 3 to 4 weeks, depending upon when their exams fall. They'll get those exam dates really early. I actually already have the ones for the grade 12s now, and we can already start looking at making sure that they're ready to think about those last 3 weeks as well. The results of the examinations are shared only in July once the exams have been marked. And at that point, that's where universities will kind of give final assessments of whether or not the students will be accepted based on their final examination results. Okay. And once again, if you do have questions, please write them down. We'll have lots of time to answer them as well. So now, one of the things that is confusing about the DP is that when we look at the full diploma, you hear the term that a student must earn 24 points to earn the final diploma. But nobody's really quite sure what that means until they start seeing how the exams are actually marked. And what we have to understand is that every subject can earn at the highest 7 points. So if you have 6 subjects, the highest point mark that you can earn for each of those subjects is 7. So you can potentially earn up to 42 points. Now, worldwide until COVID, it has been the case that only 1% of all IB students worldwide earn 42 points. So we have to realize that even in the context of our school and our students, if we're earning 42 points or more across the board, our school is doing extremely well. Yes. The world average for IB is generally 30. Last year, it went up a little bit to 34 because a lot of the examinations were not given worldwide. So they based their assessments on a little bit of a different system. But at this point, we can think that we could potentially return to that world average of 30, and we will probably see a little bit of a dip from our results from last year. But in general, we know that our students are very capable learners, and we're looking forward to seeing a good world average potentially of at least an ISV average possibly of 35 or 36. Additional points are possible as well, but they're divided only between the core subjects of the EE and TOK. Students can earn up to 3 points, but if they don't do well on them, they don't lose points. They just don't gain them. And so I have the matrix here in the image where you see the theory of knowledge and the extended essay. Basically, if you earn 2 A's on your EE and your TOK grade, you can earn the 3 points. You can also do so if you earn an A and a B. And then once you start to earn 2 B's, you go to 2 points, an A and a C, 2 points, and you can kind of see how it goes there. Now, the only thing that can cause a problem is if for some reason the student earns an E on the TOK or the extended essay, or they do not submit them. So there are requirements for earning the full diploma. And our students need to be aware that they need to put enough effort in at least to earn a D. If they earn 0 points, they don't lose the diploma. They just don't get extra points towards earning 45 points, which is the final possible. One caveat we need to be aware of too is that in whichever higher level courses you are taking, you must earn a minimum of 12 points. That means that if I have chemistry, biology, and maths at higher level, I must earn at least a 4 in each of those subjects in order to earn my full diploma. Even if I have above the 24 points, if I do not earn that minimum, sorry, I don't know why it's 3 points, it should be 4 points there. And if I do not earn that minimum, I will not earn my full diploma. So it's a very important key point for students to remember also when they're selecting higher level courses, because if they, so for instance, my students who select biology, chemistry, and maths at higher level, I always follow very carefully because they are 3 of our most difficult subjects. And sometimes they're very difficult to earn those 12 points. And I've had students who take those classes and do really well everywhere else, except suddenly they don't earn their 12 points in those higher levels and they do not earn the full diploma. So we keep track of that over the year as well. Okay, could I have you move to the next slide, Mr. Aaron? Thank you. Now, because the DP is very challenging, we do all work to support our DP students. And I'll give you a list in a minute of who our support people are. But one of the things is that we ask our students to create a system that helps them to keep all of their work organized for the 2 years. And as parents working with DP students, what I want to encourage you to do is to create, to check with your child. Do they have a system to store their work? Do they know how they're organizing their folders? Do they have, on their computer, do they have a separate folder for every grade assignment? Do they have a way of doing it within Google Suite where they keep their work? Because the sooner they have that system, the sooner it will be easier for them to access the information regularly when it is needed. They also need to keep track of deadlines to organize work. And the way that we have that set up at ISV is we have a DP calendar. Right now, I am still finalizing it with the teachers because of the changes to the curriculum last year for the grade 12s and the new calendar being formed for the 11s. We're making sure that our assessment tasks are balanced. For instance, we don't want 3 IAs due on the same day because that's just impossible for the students to work on. So what we're doing is we're making sure that our internal assessment processes are divided evenly between different months so that students will not have too many things due at the same time. Once that DP calendar is completed, I'm hoping by the end of next week, actually, it will be shared with both students, parents, and teachers to ensure that everybody has the exact same information. If a deadline is changed for some reason, a teacher has to request permission for that so that it does not impact the learning of other subject groups as well. We also ensure that all work is submitted on time for first level of feedback. And that's really important because when the students are meeting that first level deadline, the teacher can give them feedback on the work that's submitted so they can improve it. But the difficulty is that the teacher is only allowed to give written feedback once. And if a student misses a deadline, they are not required to give the feedback because the work must still be submitted on time. And if they've missed that first feedback deadline and they're still working on it and they have nothing to share, it's not possible for the teacher to give feedback. So it's very important that the students meet that first draft deadline and then rework the assignment for the final submission. And that's something that sometimes our students struggle to understand is that we must, when they're still learning what a first draft means. And sometimes the first time they have to submit an internal assessment is their first learning process. So as parents, when you hear they have an internal assessment, ask them, well, when is your first draft due? Are you ready for it? Do you have that? Are you prepared to submit what you need to get the feedback you need to do your final submission? We also look at academic honesty for our DP students. We have an academic honesty policy at the school. It's been shared with you as parents, I believe, in the parent handbook. You should be able to read it there. If not, I'm always happy to share more information about it. But we ask our students to avoid plagiarism, which is copying work from someone else and not citing it. Collusion, which means you're working together with someone to use their work instead of necessarily only your own work. And then malpractice, which is essentially something like coming into an examination, bringing unauthorized materials and cheating during an examination. So those are the types of things that we talk about in terms of academic honesty with the students. We want them to avoid dishonesty and focus on being honest in their learning processes overall. We also have to know that when it comes to editing work, internal assessments and extended essays, teachers and supervisors are not always allowed to fully edit the work. We cannot correct the grammar. We cannot always correct the citations. But it does not mean that students cannot request support from family or friends when preparing these kinds of things. We don't, of course, want the family and friends to write the piece of work, but you are always welcome to give editing advice in terms of grammar and minor corrections, not content. We also want to ensure that all of our students keep balanced in life. And if you were at the other presentation about well-being, these things really came into the forefront of the discussion in terms of ensuring that we don't just focus on academic things, but we focus on personal health and well-being as well, making sure that our students are eating well, sleeping well, exercising. CAS can bring that in as a part of life as well. It's a requirement of the program, but the goal of it is to remind our students that we're not just always memorizing things and learning things, but we are also trying to create things and live actively and see if we can be a part of an active community, giving back to that community as well. And that it's not just about memorizing facts and dates to be a student that's interesting outside of the university context, outside of the school context. And when they're applying for university, these balance of life things actually allow them to stand out as individuals in the application process more than if they only had those 42 points. Aaron, if I can have you move to the next one, please. So I have a list here of all of our DP team and support people. I'm the DP coordinator. We have a CAS coordinator who is Mr. Thierry. We have a TOK coordinator who is Mr. Edward. And our EE coordinator is Mr. Manuel. Our homeroom tutors for grade 11 and 12 are Miss Liz and Mr. David. And grade 11, Mr. James, Ms. Hien, and Mr. Hayden. And so if at any point you need support or you want to communicate about a concern regarding your child, please feel free to reach out to any of us in terms of getting information or moving forward with support processes. And I think now we might be able to go to questions if anyone has questions for me about the DP. Oh, okay. Here we have another poll if you want to try and see that. So you can go to that and let's just see. It's just kind of a quick little check that you remember how many points a student needs to earn an IB diploma. And as you're filling that out or waiting, you can add some questions to the chat. I'm not sure. Or you can start raising your hand.
You all should be able to respond going to the same website that you were just at, and then you should be able to choose a little mini quiz here.
Yeah. And so I think so far we have everyone saying B, or we have good listeners. Okay, so it is a minimum of 24 points. And so our maximum is 45, but that's only with the core. And our maximum without the core is 42. Okay, so Mr. Aaron, if I could have you move to the next slide, I think it's.
Do you have one more poll?
I think so. Okay, and so this one is there anything else you would like to know about the IB Diploma Program that I didn't cover perhaps? But at the same time, if you'd like, you could put the questions in here, and maybe they're questions that you have overall as well. Ms. Cho and Ms. Jin Young, are there any questions from the Korean and Vietnamese group that I'm not recognizing? Okay. The question that I'm seeing here is, do students receive a grade? During the school year, students receive a grade. It is also in a 1 to 7 marking process for the subject groups, except for EE and TOK. It is an A through E grade that they receive over the semesters. And every semester they do receive a grade, so you know what their progress is. They also receive grades on individual summative assessment assignments that you should be able to see and manage back as well. Their final examination grade is what you will receive in July of 2022 if you are a grade 12 student, if it's a grade 11 student, 2022. Okay, how are students' predicted IB scores calculated? Our teachers should be using the same formula that is given by the IB in terms of the percentages of the components. So for instance, we talked about the fact that internal assessments can be 20 to 30% of the mark, and then each examination paper counts between within that context, it adds up to 70 to 80%. So for instance, when I figured my psychology grades, I would take the 20% of what they would have scored on their internal assessment and what they would have regularly scored on practice tests for paper 1 and paper 2. And then I would do it utilizing the percentages for each of those components and create a score based on their results in terms of that, because that is how their score is calculated in the final examinations as well. So we should be using the same formulas to create the predicted grades as well. Okay, what happens is that the question is, how can students apply to college when their IB final exam results are not out yet? During the 2 years of the DP program, we request that teachers regularly submit predicted grades throughout that process. We have one that's done at the end of grade 11. Then we have another one that's done actually very soon here for our grade 12 students at the end of October, early November. And then we have another one that is in April, which is the final one before examinations occur. When students are applying for universities, they will use the predicted grades that are given up until December of the year that they're applying to the universities. And the universities know that they are predicted scores, and that they're in some schools we call them anticipated scores, because this is what we think the students could potentially earn. But the universities also know this is only an anticipated score. It's not the final one that they have earned yet. So what they do is they accept them some schools will accept them with a conditional offer that they must meet the IB score. Other schools will say, okay, well, we just like your scores and your high school transcript and accept without a conditional offer. But sometimes they will say, sometimes they might come back if the student hasn't reached the expectations fully and look at the offer in a different way. But Mr. Aaron can maybe explain that a little bit later. But in terms, yeah, we do predicted scores earlier. What happens when their final results change? Well, this is why Mr. Aaron always asks students to have several options in terms of where they've applied to universities. So that maybe their first goal is with the highest points that they could achieve. And then he'll say, okay, well, what happens if you don't get those results? Let's say you think you're going to get 36, but suddenly you're only going to get 30, right? We hope our results aren't that much different, but sometimes they can be. And then they should always have a second backup university in line just in case, because then they might have to look at that university. But if they haven't done any backups, then they might have a little bit of a problem. So we always try and make sure that they have the backup process there. Mr. Aaron, would you like to comment on that a little bit more?
Yeah, we do ask students to identify some of those in terms of what happens to their final, what happens when their final results change. We do ask students to, use the information they have at that time to make the best choices possible. And then, yeah, just as Gita said, we will ask them to apply to some reach schools. That's where their scores are here, but the university maybe wants a little bit more. Some match schools right where they expect to be, and then some safety schools where their predicted grade is maybe a little bit above what the university is wanting. So, yep, that's right on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, maybe we can, with university questions, Mr. Aaron might actually answer a lot of these in the next part of the presentation. So I'm going to maybe leave those for that. And if there are no specific questions about the DP right now, then we can move on to Mr. Aaron's section of the presentation.
All right, yeah, we can jump over. All right, hello everyone. Again, my name is Mr. Aaron Mayo, the University Counselor at ISB, and we're going to be presenting quite a bit of information today. So if you have any questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat, as I know a lot of you have been doing. And a lot of people remember questions, after the presentation is finished. If that's the case, just shoot me an email. That's probably the best way to ask a question regarding university. And then if you would like to set up a time for sort of a face-to-face one-on-one Zoom session, we can arrange that too. But I'm going to actually get you back onto your phones. And I just want to take a quick poll. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of university application? So I'm going to give you all about 1 minute to reply here. You should be able to just kind of stay on that same page that you were on. And we should be getting some responses here, just so I can get a sense of what you all are thinking right now. So I'll give you about 30 more seconds. All right, as words are coming in, I can see that this is a process that probably produces some anxiety and confusion and stress, it looks like. It looks like we've got difficult as being the biggest word here. Yeah, I do hope that this presentation can help relieve some of that stress, some of the misunderstanding, help clarify a few things. And like I said, if there's something you still have questions on, please do send me an email afterwards, and I can help to answer and alleviate some of that. So good. Thank you all for participating. That's just kind of helpful to get a sense of where everyone's at. Last one before we jump into our presentation. This was based on a poll from admission representatives from around the world. What is the most important aspect of a student's application? You have 4 choices: grades, counselor letter of rec, extracurricular activity, strength of curriculum. So what do you think is the most important aspect of a student's application? Looks like we have an even split between the top 3. Here's another 30 seconds to respond. Grades in all courses is jumping ahead. Okay. All right. Well, it looks like we got just a few more maybe trickling in here. And it looks like you all are pretty much right on the money. Grades in all courses is the answer here. This was ranked as the most important part of a student's application. So how the student does in high school is a strong predictor of success in college. So if a student's not doing very well in high school, based on data, universities believe the student's not going to do very well in college. Conversely, if a student is doing super well in high school, the universities, find that those students also do well in college. So grades are kind of far and away the most important part of a student's application. So counselor letter of rec, extracurricular activities, also strength of curriculum are all important aspects of the application process and things that universities see, but the grades and the scores are really what is going to be the most important aspect of a student college application. It's good. Thank you for those of you who were able to participate in that. So at ISB, we've got 2 different graduation pathways that we actually just talked about a little bit. One is that full diploma that students receive when they meet all of the diploma requisites. That's the IB diploma, the DP course certificate, and then at the bottom here, those are those students who get 6 DP subjects, 3 SL plus 3 HL, and they complete their CAS, their EE, and their TOK. That's that full diploma. That's sort of the gold standard. that is what we are striving for. If we don't quite reach that, we do have DP course students where they get a DP certificate. And then, so that can be with a certain number of DP subjects, they complete CAS and can submit the EE and TOK essay. So a few different pathways for graduation for students in terms of what they receive when they graduate. But we are looking to get as many students as possible into the full DP diploma with a full IB diploma. So where do our students go? Where do the ISB students go? This is the class of 2021, so our most recent graduating class. You can put it in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can just unmute. But is there anything that surprises you about these numbers? Or these percentages?
What about Australia?
Yeah, so we actually didn't have any students go to Australia last year. Yeah, that's a big one. And that's a really popular destination for students in Vietnam. So that's a surprising one to me. Good. Thank you for pointing that out. You know, this was kind of the year of COVID, so we probably had a few more students kind of sticking closer to home, and that 32% of students attending university in Vietnam. And remember, there was only 21 graduating students, so each, if one person attends, they get 5%. But yeah, so this is kind of what it looked like, and just kind of give you a sense of the breadth of countries that students are applying to at ISB. I think, yeah. So this just gives that overview a little bit. So, as part of the application process, your students will be asked to become familiarized with Maya Learning. The grade 12 students in particular are really getting proficient in this program, and in grade 11 they're just starting to delve into it a little bit, but it's a way, you know, there are interest surveys on there where students can explore careers and majors. But one of the things that we work with grade 11 and 12 on is kind of finalizing that list of universities that they would like to apply to. So the first list, and a list that should be kind of solidified by the end of grade 11, is the long list. This is grade 11. We're really not ruling anything out yet. We are just researching schools, researching programs, researching countries, and we're just adding them to this big list. And you know, we can have as many universities on there as we want. Hopefully, you know, you've done at least a little bit of research on the school and the program, and you kind of add it to this colleges I'm considering list in Maya Learning. And again, that's the long list. That's just to say, hey, I'm interested in this school. I'm going to put it on this list. Then, not pictured right below here, there's a move to applying button. And when you click that, it actually moves the school to this list. On the left-hand side, you'll see applying list. And this is how students know, this is how we know that students are going to apply to a school. So the short list is the schools that your student will certainly apply to. You're going from the, well, maybe I'll apply, I'm not sure, to this is on my list, I'm applying to this school. So that's kind of the difference between the long list and the short list. And, you know, kind of how students should be doing that is attending webinars, attending information sessions, contacting admission representatives from those schools, contacting current students at those schools if they have any cousins or friends that are studying there. How do you like it? How are the teachers? How are the program? How's the city? How's the food? How are the dorms? All that kind of stuff. You want to kind of take all of that in as a big picture. And then if it is a good fit, then the student adds it to this applying list, or also known as short list. And this is how we know, okay, this student is sending we are sending their documents to these schools from here. So that's kind of the long list and the short list. Does anyone have any questions about that?
How many colleges, how many applications can a student, like do? Yeah.
Excellent question. And we are in line with other international schools, and the limit is 10, which is actually quite a lot. I think in another slide, we'll see that most students apply to between 6 and 9 schools. And we do set that limit at 10. However, the University of California and UCAS, which is the UK application portal, those only count as one. And within those, students can apply to multiple. So there's kind of some ways around it if they want to apply to more, but really it is a pretty strict policy on 10 schools. Good question. That's the short list. Those are the ones that students can apply to. Excellent question. Thank you. Any other questions?
Aaron, we have a question from Miss Van Chang. Yes, and the question is, how many schools that is considered high risk can a student apply to?
How many schools that a school is considered what? High risk?
Yes.
Excellent question. Typically, we want 3 to 4 what we consider reach schools. That's where our scores are here, and the university wants a little bit higher. Those are reach schools. 3 to 4 of those is appropriate, I think. And then we have a match where our grades and our scores are matching what the university is asking for. And then we have maybe 1 or 2 safety schools where our scores are a little bit higher than what the universities are asking for. So 3 to 4, I would say, is an appropriate number. Thanks, Chow. Any other questions about the long list or short list? All right, so again, we are working now on finalizing that shortlist, and I have set kind of a deadline of September 29th to update the shortlist for students. So that's where we want that list in Maya Learning set. So we know in the UC office those are the universities that students are applying to. Again, most students apply to 6 to 9 universities. Globally, they're limited to 10. These are the systems that count as 1 each. So UCAS students can actually apply to 5 schools within the UCAS, and that only counts as 1 for us. Okay. The University of California, students can submit an application there and be considered at a lot of the UC schools, and that only counts as 1 application for us. And then the Ontario, Canada application system, where students can apply to several different schools there through that, which also count as only 1. So a few different ways. But yeah, we do limit to 10 applications. final short list on Maya Learning. So we're going to go ahead and lock this on October 4th. And to change after October 4th, we'll ask students to meet with us and discuss a little bit about why they're changing, what they're changing to, and make sure that it makes sense and it's a good decision. So this is a pretty early deadline. We're asking students to do their research early and make a commitment early to their schools. And then if things change, which they inevitably do, we can make changes after that. It's just going to take a conversation to get that list changed. You should have received, if you're a grade 12 student guardian, we did send home a university application agreement, which should be 2122, for to list those schools and kind of agree to our policies. So that's something the student and the parent sign.
So excuse me, can I please ask a question? So when you say the deadline, is it for those who were born in 2004 or 5?
Those one, can you repeat that one more time, please?
Yes, so I saw the deadline, something like the end of September. Is that for students who are in grade 12 or in grade 11 now?
Excellent question. This is grade 12. Grade 11, we will ask that they have a long list submitted in Maya Learning by the end of grade 11. And then kind of over the summer and into grade 12, they should be eliminating those schools that for whatever reason aren't a good fit for them. And then now for the grade 12, we are working on kind of finalizing that short list that the students are going to apply to. Excellent question. Thank you. Okay, so early applications for US universities. These can be a little bit confusing. So I did want to cover them here, and you will get a copy of this slide, so don't feel like you have to take any notes or anything. But essentially, the ED, or early decision, that is binding. So if a student is applying ED, or early decision, that means once they are accepted, or if they are accepted to that school, then they withdraw all of their other applications and they commit to attending that one school. So this is really only appropriate for those students that have that dream school. This is that school that, if this is that #1 school, my cousin goes there, my parents went there, it's the perfect fit for me. If I'm accepted, I'm definitely 100% gonna go. A couple downsides of the early decision. So it is a nice program. You get your results very quickly. You get your application decision very quickly. Usually they're in November, and before winter break, you have your admissions decision. So within 5-6 weeks if you are accepted or not. So that's a nice feature. So you find out really early. You can relax. You've been admitted to your university already, and it's nice to kind of get that over with and done. Some of the downfalls, I would say, is you can't compare financial aid packages. So if you want to maybe shop around a little bit and apply to a few different schools and see what they offer you for financial aid, ED is not a good option because you pretty much accept their financial aid package and then withdraw. There is one exception. If they do not offer you enough financial aid, you can sort of get out of it, but really it's a pretty binding agreement. It allows early applications. You can still apply EA if you're applying ED, and regular decision, you can apply regular decision in addition to your ED application as well. Early action. This is where I try to encourage students to go. This is the one I think is most appropriate for most students. If they don't have that one dream school they've been dreaming about their whole life, the early action is kind of the sweet spot. You still get your results, your admission decision early. You can still compare financial aid packages. It's not as binding as the ED program. So this is where I like to encourage students to apply. And then the single choice early action, not binding. You can still compare financial aid packages. You can't apply to any other early applications, and but you can apply to a regular decision program. So this is a little bit confusing, and you may need to come back to this chart at some point. But so any questions about this? The EA, you'll often hear them referred to as EAED. Any questions about any of that?
Is there any difference in terms of deadline for each of that system?
Yeah, excellent question. Yeah, so you'll see ED deadlines, you'll see EA deadlines, you'll see RD, regular decision deadlines, and then you may see rolling admissions, which just means as soon as the student applies and they have all their documents in, then the university makes a decision on a rolling basis. They don't have these set deadlines. But yep, there will be different deadlines for EAED, and they are typically earlier on in the year, usually around that November 1 mark. So coming up here in a few weeks. And this is another reason why we sort of try to get students to commit to their list early and think about the schools they want early, because there are a lot of applications that have really early deadlines, like in October or November of their senior year, which is quite early. So it's good, if they want to consider those options, they do need to know in September, by September, if they're going to take advantage of those or not. Excellent question. Thank you. Any other questions about EAED stuff? We'll jump along here. So we do have an intent notification form that grade 12 is aware of. The deadline was September 9th. However, we will accept those a little bit later too, if they still need a few more days or another week or so to decide. But this is a form that students fill out if they are interested in Oxford or Cambridge, any UK medicine, veterinary, or dental program, or any US early application, early decision restrictive, early action program. So again, we're flexible on the September 9th one here for this. This is just to let us know. And again, we're just trying to push those students to think about it and to make those decisions early. It also gives us more time to make sure they have a really good personal statement. They've got all of their tests that they need, and they're ready to go. So this one, don't worry too much about, but if you do have a student who's interested in applying early, we just ask that they fill this out as soon as possible.
So is there any difference between RED, restrictive early action, and single choice early action?
No, they are the same.
Because I see two different terms, So
yeah,
REA and then single choice.
Yep, restricted early action is you can only choose one school EA. So it's kind of a weird ED program almost, but it's not as binding. So very similar, if not the same thing, to single choice early action. Just another confusing name for it. IB predicted grades. Gita talked about that a little bit before, and we've got September 21, 25. If we have students applying to Oxford, Oxbridge, UK Medicine. I don't believe we do this year. October 14th to 23rd. All other UK applicants will meet with me to compare their predicted grades with the university requirements. US institutions do not typically require predicted grades. There may be some that do request them, but most will not. Teacher letter of recommendation letters. Students asked for these towards the end of grade 11, and the teachers submit them to us in the university counseling office, and we review them and upload them into My Learning. So students typically ask up to 2 teachers to write recommendation letters. So they submit kind of brag sheets to the teachers where they tell a little bit about themselves to the students and or to the teachers and get that feedback. Teachers submit their recommendation info to us by October 18th, and teachers agree to write favorable recommendation letters that add value to a student's application. So it is up to the teacher if they decide to write a letter for that student. There might be some students where they maybe don't feel comfortable writing a letter for, so it is good for students to develop those relationships with teachers and be engaged in class and turning in their homework in on time, so they can kind of get the best letter of recommendation possible from the teachers that they decide to ask. So typically recommended that students ask teachers who maybe they've had in multiple classes, who maybe they've had in separate years, so the teacher can maybe comment on the student's growth, all of that fun stuff. Some students think they need, if I'm interested in studying math in college, then I need my math teacher to write a letter of recommendation. That is true sometimes, but I would say 95% of the time, most universities just want 1 or 2 teacher letters of rec, and it can be from any subject. And the teachers are really just commenting on how does the student perform in class? Is he or she academically interested in this subject? Do they turn their homework in on time? Do they work well with other students? Do they participate in lectures? Do they ask a lot of questions? Stuff like that. So it is recommended students ask those teachers who they feel comfortable with and have a positive relationship with. So the teacher letter of recommendation is really kind of focused on the student in the classroom and how are they as a student, what's their interest in the subject that the teacher's teaching, how do they work well with other students in the classroom, are they a very active learner, or are they a little bit quieter, a little more shy, a little more introverted, what is their learning style, stuff like that. Counselors provide sort of that macro version letter. So we look at the student in the context of their class and in the context of the school. We really take sort of that big picture approach, commenting on their extracurriculars, their leadership opportunities they've had outside of the classroom, how they interact with all the staff and staff and faculty and stuff like that. So that's sort of the difference between the counselor letter and the teacher letter. we do provide some personal, social, emotional support to students. So we are bound by rules of confidentiality. Obviously, we'd connect with parents if a child's in any harm or they disclose something to us. We would never mention confidential information unless it's discussed with the student and the family. So again, the counselor letter of rec really focuses in on those personal traits, the interests outside of the classroom, academic struggles and success, intercultural experiences, if stuff like that. If they speak a language at home that's different from the language at school, and what are their intercultural experiences like so far. Okay, so there are some supporting documents that students will submit to, or that our university office will submit to universities. So we will submit up to 2 letters of rec, that my counselor letter of rec that I write for all students. We submit IB predicted grades, the ISB transcript, as well as the transfer transcript. The transfer transcript, so we do have quite a few students who joined us year 11, and most universities will want to see 4 years of high school grades. So that would be like their IGCSEs, 11 and 12. So, and then we submit the high school profile, just kind of an overview of the school, our grading system, academic policies, and stuff like that. So those are those supplemental, those supporting documents that that we send to universities. So how do those get sent? So we ask students to just email me when they have paid for and submitted their online application, and we know, okay, this student has applied. We just go in and it's quite easy on our end. We just go in and once they're uploaded, submit their documents onto the universities. Few different ways we do that. Maya Learning is how we send documents for most of the North American universities. That's the US and Canada. And some countries like Japan or Korea in particular really prefer the hard copy, stamped and signed version of their diploma and their transcripts and stuff. So we will work with students on submitting those hard copies as well. And then we submit documents through UCAS for UK universities. So that's sort of how they get sent. Admission tests, these have changed a lot in the past year. So obviously we have the ACT and SAT. Those are the college entrance tests that students take. As you can see at the bottom here, many US schools, a lot of Canadian schools too, have gone test optional due to COVID-19 and the inability for students to register and take the SAT recently. So just something to keep in mind as students are considering whether or not to take the SAT. English proficiency, TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo. Typically for Australia, we recommend IELTS because I believe they require that for their visa application, and then the rest are widely accepted at most universities in terms of proving or demonstrating English language proficiency. There are some medical schools in the UK that require special tests, like the UCAT or BMAT. In law, most European universities will require the LNAT, and Oxford and Cambridge do have a lot of university admission tests in addition to everything the student normally submits. And the students are responsible for meeting these deadlines. We help students register if they need it and take that, but that's a big part of that self-efficacy that we're working on with students, and being proactive and searching for the requirements from universities, figuring out what they need and making sure that they're taking the appropriate steps to meet those requirements. This is just an info slide, the 2021-2022 SAT testing dates. These are being canceled right now in Vietnam due to COVID-19 and the strict lockdown, but the next one would be October 2nd. And then if they haven't registered yet, there's a registration deadline, October 8th, for that November 6th deadline. So just sort of being aware of when those test dates and registration deadlines are, to make sure that if they need an SAT, figuring out sort of how to take it. Okay, I'm going to go through this one a little bit quickly. I know we're getting close to the end of time, and I still want to help answer some questions. Universities really need to verify the English language of students whose passports are not from an English language speaking country. So they do this by requiring different tests. However, being at ISB and at a school where English is the medium of instruction, a lot of universities will waive that English language requirement or English language proficiency exam requirement. So if we just let them know, hey, this is a student from ISB and she has studied for 4 years at ISB, and she has a waiver for the English language proficiency exam. So this will vary university by university. So it's important for the students to check the university websites and make sure they are, if they need an English language proficiency exam, they are taking that. So again, UK, Australia, typically would recommend the IELTS because of the visa application requirement aspect of it. Our students do very well on these exams, so it shouldn't be something they're spending a ton of time studying for, obviously familiarizing themselves with the test, but if they do need to take it, it should not be something they are spending hours and hours and hours studying for. However, if they are not confident or they struggle a little bit with English, then making sure you do well on that is important. So actually, we will most students will send these to universities directly from the testing agency. Most universities require that. However, there are some universities where the students can send us their scores, we upload it with their transcript, and then they accept them that way. But for the most part, students send those scores directly to the institution. Okay, so sort of my role right now, I'm doing check-ins with grade 12. We just sort of talking about where they're at in the application process. We just participated in a college essay boot camp for US students, and there's one coming up next week for UK students looking at the UK. So these are little workshops that students are encouraged to participate in, kind of depending on which application essay they are writing, because they're a little bit different for the US and the UK application systems. And senior application workshop. So throughout the year, I'll be offering workshops on the Common App, UCAS, UC Coalition, as well as applying to universities in Korea, Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. These will sort of be throughout the year, and we'll be encouraging students to attend those if it's a workshop that they are interested in applying to. And some of these, it's me and a university rep from that country. So it's you do have a someone from that country who's helping students through the process as well. So the role for me, I'm really here to provide that individual support for students, small group and seminar work, application workshops, feedback on college essay, personal statements, submitting the documents to the university, social emotional part as they go through this overwhelming college process, and guide students to making their values-centered, well-informed decisions. And really want this process to empower students as much as possible. Like, we want students, when they leave this high school, to feel empowered, feel emboldened. They've navigated their way through this process. They feel like they can tackle any problem. So it really is putting, most of high school is really kind of the teacher presenting information and the student remembering that information, synthesizing it, and producing some work. This is really more student driven, and I'm here as a guide, help connect the pieces, help connect students to resources, helping them through that process. It's really the students and the parents who are choosing their path. I can offer assistance and feedback, but it's really student and parent driven. We do have an excellent resource, the ISV UC website. There is a ton of information on here, so I do encourage you all to check that out when you can. There's a for parent section that is really, really good, and has a lot of great stuff on there if you're interested. College visits to ISV this year will be mostly remote due to COVID-19. So we are sending weekly or bi-weekly emails to students announcing online opportunities. We also recommend students to sign up for mailing lists, particularly for schools that they're really interested in. A lot of universities can gauge the level of interest from a student based on, are they on our mailing list? Have they attended any online information sessions? Stuff like that. Many schools provide online interviews. So if a student is asked to interview, that will most likely take place online, but depending where we're at with COVID, it could be in person. So again, this is kind of a informational slide for you all, and mostly for students as they are filling out their applications online. Again, you guys will have a copy of this, so you can kind of refer back to this later. So as one of our final slides here, what should parents be doing? How can you help your students? So every student is in a unique place in the college application process. So I know it's really tempting to compare your student to maybe your neighbor's student, or their cousin or something, but it really is a unique process, very individualized for each student. So please just remember that each student is going to have a little bit of a different experience as they go through the college application process. It is the student applying to the university. A lot of universities have very explicit stuff on their website that says this should be the work of the student and not of an agent or a parent. So we really do ask that the students fill this out. If they have questions, that's what I'm here for. If I don't know the answer, I can find someone who does pretty quickly. So and it is them who is traveling to the foreign country and taking those classes and interacting with the professors. So we do want to really focus on what's best for the student and what's best for the family. Discussing finance, this is sort of a tricky thing. I know this is not a super fun conversation to have with students, but it can be really helpful for students to know kind of what the budget looks like. And we can find there are a ton of opportunities for every budget. So depending on the budget that is right for you and your family, we can make it work. We really can. So, but we do need to know. So discussing the financing of a college education with your students be super helpful. Create a timeline. I'm actually sharing a template with students that they're asked to fill out, but maybe reviewing that timeline with your students and making sure that you're all on the same page in terms of getting the application in on time. Some parents will talk to their kids maybe too much about the university application process, and some parents may be talking a little bit too little. One suggestion is to decide on a regular time to discuss this process where you're both kind of expecting it. All right, we've set aside 30 minutes to an hour, and we're going to kind of hammer this home. Maybe don't bring it up too much outside of that. I know I'm talking to them about it. Their classmates are talking to them about it. The parents are talking to them about it. But kind of setting those boundaries and working within those can be really helpful for students, so they sort of don't get blindsided with questions all the time regarding university application process. All right, that was a ton of information, and I think I just went a little bit over my time. Any questions about applications, timelines, any of that stuff? You can put it in the chat, raise your hand, or just unmute and let me know.
Aaron, maybe we can stop sharing and then you'll be able to see if someone raises their hand too. Yeah.
Okay.
So Gita, we have a question from parent that I think is relating to DP. Can you please explain what is the difference between internal exam and external exam?
Okay, we have two types of assessments. So we have internal assessment, and it is a longer kind of an assignment that students are assigned in connection to the subject that they're learning in. And every subject has one of these. Sometimes it's called an internal assessment, sometimes it's called an investigation, depending upon the subject. And so it will look like, it will usually be done in parts where they have to kind of decide on a topic, then they'll have to do some research, then they'll have to do some writing. In science, they might have to do a laboratory experiment that they've created, and then they have to write it up and critique it and give an evaluation of what they've accomplished. And that assignment is submitted sometime during the 2 years in the DP. Some subjects already do it in grade 11, other subjects will only do it in grade 12. In English, the internal assessment is an oral assessment. So they will have an oral examination where they'll actually have to record a response to a set of questions. So our internal assessments look a little different in each one. The external assessments are only the exams that occur in May. So those are the final examinations in May. And then what happens is that the IB, we have to upload the internal assessment information to the IB so they can look at it and moderate it and mark it to make sure the teachers are marking correctly. And then the students will get a final mark from the IB for the internal assessment. And then it will be combined with the examination grades across with those four components, usually the internal assessment and papers 1, 2, and 3 usually. Sometimes there'll only be 2 papers though as well. Is that clear, or can I do you still have questions about that? Any more? Can I clarify anything further?
Thank you. I just typed in the chat box, and now I have another question from Mr. Aaron. From Miss Miley, she saw the list, class of 2021, and see that no school in Australia So can you please explain about that?
Yeah, this was the class from last year, so I did not work with them, but I would imagine that because Australia was in a very strict lockdown and they were not allowing students into the country, that students who wanted to study in person most likely chose other countries, would be my guess. If they decided to study in Australia, they would be studying online for a while. So that would be my guess. Obviously we still help students applying to Australia. I actually like helping students apply to Australia because their application process is very straightforward. They're really looking at the grades and IB predicted scores only. They don't require letters of recommendation or personal statement in most cases. So those applications are really easy, and I do enjoy helping students apply to Australia, and it's obviously a great country. So.
Okay. Do we have any more questions?
Yes. I have a few questions, please. So my son just graduated from another school. Actually, he finished the IGCSE, and he got his results, and he just moved to ISB for the next 2 years, IB program. And I also read about the application process, just in a small way to support him. It is kind of big and, a big project and overwhelming. So mom can help a little bit, but he actually does all of the work, I guess. Okay. And so my question is, of the 4 years, which are believed to be essential to college admission, so what role does IGCSE play? Does it count? Or most of it would be, so college admission committee would look at IB program and journey. Yes, that's the first question.
Yeah, so it's probably a disappointing answer, but really the answer is it depends. So in the US, they're going to look at 4 years of university grades. The IGCSEs count as the equivalent of grades 9 and 10. So those would be important scores, and counting for 2 years of a student's high school curriculum. And then they would also look at sort of how the student is doing in the IB program as well. So in addition to just looking at grades, there's also things like grade trend, which is did the student maybe start off a little bit slower and then sort of pick things up towards grade 10, 11, and 12? Or have they always been a really good student? What we really want to avoid is those where they started really high and then towards grade 11 and 12 sort of go down a little bit. So they do look at things like that. They also consider things like course rigor. Even within the IB diploma, there are different levels of rigor based on the student's choices. So, there are a lot of caveats to that, but I would say it's an important piece and would be required for most universities.
So which means it does count, but it depends on the universities that evaluate the application, right?
Yes, that's a good way to.
Can I add one thing too, is that as the students are working in the DP, one of my responsibilities as DP coordinator is to monitor the progress of the students consistently as well. And I work with Mr. Aaron and the homeroom teachers to do that. So one of the things that we will also do is at important times like semester exams and end of year processes, we'll always review the progress of the student to ensure that we don't have that dip, and that we can get on to putting some processes in place to ensure that they keep going up or are steady instead as well. So, yeah.
Yes, and about the SAT things, so you did mention, Mr. Aaron, you did mention that some colleges for the past 1 or 2 years they've gone SAT optional, and yeah, and it feels good. But in case a student does register for the SAT, so does IC have any particular support related to that? Just a question, yeah. And then the second and one more question is about the experience sharing things. I think the current students would benefit significantly in big ways. I mean, significantly from the experiences and insights and experiences from previous student success stories. So I heard that last year ISB has some very successful students, and they would be great inspiration for the current students. So do you offer any workshops like that?
Two excellent questions. Gita, do you know if we offer SAT prep at all at ISB?
I have, because I'm new, I'm also not aware of that. I'm not sure if maybe Colin can add something to that for us.
Yes, can you hear me there?
Yes.
Good morning. Yes, I've just actually messaged Mr. Aaron directly. Hopefully he'll be able to see that. In previous years, we've been able to offer the PSAT as a preparation for the SATs, so that students can get an idea of what it is. The sharing of alumni stories, actually, we have done that before. And obviously we are looking to somehow bring alumni working with our current students over this first term as well, both grade 11 and grade 12. Very lucky because quite a few are still around in Hanoi at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. And I'll add to that too, the College Board website has over 10 SAT practice tests that students can kind of download and practice with themselves. There's also the Khan Academy app, which is another great resource for students to practice SAT questions. I think they give one a day, so that's another great resource. And then, yeah, incorporating alumni is great. I think a lot of times they really listen to alumni more than what I am telling them. So yeah, definitely, and definitely incorporating that in the future. And I'm working with some of our staff here to contact them. And that's actually one of the nice things about this digital revolution COVID area, where we can organize that maybe even more easily now than we could in the future, where they would all be expected to come to the ISD campus and present, but we can do that kind of virtually now too.
And I can say that the homeroom teachers and I have already discussed this as one of the things that we want to organize for the students at some point as well. So it's definitely on our list too.
Okay, maybe one last question, the very, very last one. Well, the IGCSE exam was overwhelming for us. We didn't really know that it was that intense. For 2 months, morning and then afternoon, morning, afternoon, he worked extra hard, but it was a little bit intense. And so could you just give us a hint about the IB exams look like? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What will happen is that you will get a schedule already relatively early, so you can see what they will look like for sure, which exams are on days. And one of the things that I always have the students do is I have them create a calendar ahead of time, well ahead of time, so they know what that May will look like. What days they have 2 exams, what day they have 3, if they have a few days in between. And then we start looking at how they can plan their study periods for that time period, and also preparing for the examinations ahead of time. And the goal is that you do have 4 weeks of, the exams start on April 29th, and then they go all the way through May 20th. And so it is a long period, but they should be well aware of which examinations will come well before those weeks start as well. And the goal is that we will have a clear revision process in place for the students before they begin the examinations. And most subject groups should already be done with the teaching processes well into February, March. And so then they already would have 2 months of examination preparation time together with their teachers. And then also teachers will offer revision sessions during exams if they're needed as well.
Okay, so that seems to last 3 weeks, the exam.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks rather than 2 months, like IGCSE. It was it was long lasting and it was very just overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think even though it seems shorter, it's still very long for the students. And one of the things that I like to encourage too is parent support in getting the students to school on time, with making sure they've eaten before examinations. I want to make sure we have snacks set up for them between exams if they have several on one day, and things like that too. So those are the types of things that we want to ensure that they have that extra support and help within the context of taking those exams as well. But once we get closer to that point, we'll have a parent meeting separately about that with the parents as well.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been very helpful, to be able to visualize the whole process, just that. And I'm sure that you'll be updating us with all of the details necessary.
Yes, we will be, definitely.
Okay, and we have one more question. Please explain about the different type of offer by college.
Yeah, that's primarily in the UK, which will offer conditional and unconditional offer. In a lot of cases, the conditional offer will be, if the student has those final grades that they're expecting to, and the final scores that they're anticipated in having, those are the conditional offer. And then the unconditional offer is, we like your scores and your grades as they are now, and you're offered a position. You're offered a position at the university. So that's my understanding of those. Is there another one that someone had a question on?
Do we have any more questions? Okay, if
I think that is it. Let's just give the parents some more minutes if they have any questions.
If we don't have any more questions in this forum, I would like to encourage you to always message us on emails to let us know if there's something you would like us to follow up with you particularly. If there is a question you have particularly regarding your son or daughter, please feel free to contact us as well, and we will work together with you to answer those questions or concerns. And in general, we want to just let you know that we're here to support you overall in terms of working with your students in both the DP and in the university counseling processes. We want to thank you for coming today and speaking with us. Mr. Collins, did you want to say something as well?
Just to say thank you very much, Ms. Gitta and Mr. Aaron, for that great presentation, as well as Ms. Cho and Ms. Jin Young for the translation. And most of all to the parents that have been in this session and those that have also joined us this morning. Please do continue to communicate with us, as well as for anything, you know where we are, and please encourage your sons and daughters to do that. We are here to support that journey all the way through. So please do have a good rest of your day. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, Ms. Cho, is there anybody here who has another question for me before they leave? Or, sorry, I had to get up and answer my hotel door.
Okay, I haven't seen anything else,
Okay,
so you can stop recording. Yes.
okay, it just looks like maybe some people haven't left yet, so I think I'll just go ahead and close the chat, the Zoom session then. I'll end the recording.